We are going to be talking about Batman Forever. This is my big underrated DC pick for tonight. I've talked before about my fascination and love of Batman Forever. Now, along these lines, with me, Batman Forever 2 also professionally was a big watershed moment. One of the first things I actually ever did for DC, through Warner Brothers, is I actually designed T-shirts actually for Batman Forever, and they were used actually to encourage people to pre-order the VHS. That's right, everybody, the VHS of Batman Forever. So, and It was in tandem with Blockbuster Video. So if you pre-ordered Batman Forever through Blockbuster Video and certain Blockbuster chains, you would actually possibly get a Batman Forever T-shirt. And I actually did all the artwork actually for that Batman Forever T-shirt. I had a lot of help though with that too. Lynn Workman, my good friend Lynn Workman, actually helped me with that. I got to do that job because of a friend named John Thomas, who actually brought the opportunity to us through an advertising agency. And that was the first time I ever worked on Batman officially, was actually doing those T-shirts. And it's a fond memory of mine. I'm not going to show it this evening, but the original artwork actually for one of the shirts is actually over here, back here on the wall. Now, one of the things that I enjoy about Batman Forever, and let me go ahead and read the summary here just real quick. And then I'll talk about some of the challenges of being a fan of Batman Forever, because there are challenges that go along with telling people that you like Batman Forever. But the summary as comes from IMDb as follows. Batman must battle former District Attorney Harvey Dent, who is now Two-Face, and Edward Nygma, the Riddler, with help from an amorous psychologist and a young circus acrobat who becomes his sidekick, Robin. All right, so here's the thing. I remember back in the day, because I'm going to talk about the film back in the day, because that's when I originally saw it. At the time, I've talked before about how I feel about Batman Returns. We have some older episodes of the original show that existed before Retro Rogues. And I've talked about my love and sort of kind of sideways glancing feel about Batman Returns. There's a lot of things I love about Batman Returns. There's a lot of things that really drive me nuts about Batman Returns that I really hate. I've talked before about the fact that, spoiler alert, everyone. But while everyone loves the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman, and I do as well, that's not really Catwoman. That's actually the Crow. That's the Crow in a Batman movie, in case anyone hasn't figured that out yet. But one of the things
that's interesting. I've never heard that before, Dave. I honestly never heard that before. First time I've ever heard that.
Yeah, basically, if you think about Catwoman's origin versus the comics versus what they do in the film, I mean, she's basically just a version of the Crow in the Batman universe. That's what she is.
Interesting. Never heard that before.
I've always felt that way. So one of the things about Batman Forever for me was I was a little trepidatious about it. I was kind of hoping it would be good. I remember at the time, I liked Val Kilmer from Top Gun, but I wasn't too sure about him being Batman. And I remember I went and saw the film kind of hoping it would be good, because I hope it's good. I don't know. And I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed the film. One of the things that makes Batman Forever, kind of, I think, turn some people off is that I feel like that Joel Schumacher, I think, was familiar with the source material. But then secondly, there is a lot of nods and salutes and a lot of love given to the Adam West 60s TV show in this film. And I feel like that those things are sometimes the things that kind of turn people off, because it's not quite the same dark, brooding Batman exactly that we're getting the previous films. It's definitely a departure. But I love those things about this particular film. I like the fact that it's not too overly concerned about the dark, but at the same point, there is the pathos, from the other films. And there's a lot of kind of interesting artistic licenses kind of taken that works in this film, but is kind of confusing for people by the time you get to Batman v Superman. For example, we do have a moment where a giant bat flies out and Bruce kind of confronts him. There's a lot more to that they actually shot than what they actually used in the film, but there is that moment. And it works in this movie because it's a very fantastical portrayal of Batman. it's not a real city. You know what I mean? It's Gotham City, and it's its own unique place. Like, it exists in its own little pocket universe. It has its own reality. Its own, gravity, its own rules, if you will, right? Just all across this particular film. But where that scene works, for example, in this film, right, where a giant bat flies out and Bruce and him have a moment, right? By the time you get to Batman v Superman and they try to do it, it's weird and it's confusing. You know what I mean? It's interesting how it'll kind of work in this one, but you put it in another movie and that weird sort of, it doesn't make sense. But
you know what's interesting also, we've discussed this. There's that huge rumor that basically that's part of an entire different cut of the film. That there is actually like a director's cut version of this film as well. In fact, there was actually some people out there that were trying to see if they could get it on HBO Max, and I know that discussion was going on around the same time that we heard that the Snyder cut was actually going to greenlit and coming out. So there is this big rumor about Batman Forever that there is in fact another version of this film out there somewhere.
And along those lines too, at one point there was actually this rumor that turned out to be false, that they were actually going to kind of like the way that they did Batman 66, they did Wonder Woman 77. There was this discussion, like right now they're doing an 89 Batman series. It actually kind of picks up with the Michael Keaton movies with that version of Batman. They were going to do it as a digital first and then collect it. They were doing a Superman series now too as well. Now, before, way back when they announced Batman 66 and they were doing Wonder Woman 77, there was an initial rumor that they were going to kind of do that actually with the Batman Forever or the Keaton one. And I remember I called every single editorial contact I had at DC and begged to work on that, and they wouldn't let me do it. But so anyhow, one of the things that I love about this film too, and it's interesting because as I was looking at the trading cards, it's amazing how beautifully shot this movie is. This movie is incredibly well shot. Like, it's just the lighting, the costume design, the vehicle design. I mean, there's just so much beautiful, fun things to look at in this particular film. And that's one of the things I love about this movie, is just how beautifully shot it is and how much care was kind of taken with different aspects of the film. And I feel like, in all honesty, the more I revisit and I look at this film, I feel like, you have to be in the right mood to like this movie or want to watch this movie, for starters. It's not for everyone. But I just feel like that it's just every time I come back to this film, I'm always seeing something new that's interesting with how they put this film together. When you talk about the cinematography, the soundtrack is really fun. The score by Elliot Goldenthal is really great. Like, it's got such a great score.
The soundtrack for this was very popular. I remember that. The soundtrack for this film was very, very popular.
And it's interesting too, because this is one of those cool films where you can get, Elliot Goldenthal's score, by the composer who did the orchestral music, but you can also get the soundtrack. And a lot of the soundtrack music is played in the film as well as the score. And I've always felt like that everyone in this film does a great job. I have kind of some issues always with Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face, because I feel like
I was gonna say,
Joker.
Really?
Yeah,
that's my biggest issue with this film, and we've talked about this, I think, off the air as well. My biggest issue with this film is Tommy Lee Jones, because he's a great actor, and I think he did a terrible interpretation of Two-Face, because Two-Face is such a really dark character, an interesting character. And we've also discussed the fact that, everybody was anticipating that Billy D. Williams was going to be Two-Face, because they had already introduced him as Harvey Dent in the previous Batman films. And I thought that was going to be really interesting. And I think Billy D. Williams' Two-Face would have been really cool. I really would love to have seen what he would have done with the character, And everybody had that anticipation. And I still never get that. It's my biggest issue with this film. It's like, why didn't they have Billy D. Williams fulfill that sort of promise? You know what I mean? To the fans, in the fans' mind, that, hey, everybody who knew Batman knew who Harvey Dent was. You know what I mean? And so you feel like you're going to get that payoff. And they totally just erased that. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't even get into that background at all, because, man, Two-Face is one tragic character. You know what I mean? The fact that, they really could have done something cool with that, with kind of showing the friendship that had developed between Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent, and then sort of the tragic, the tragedy of that story. The animated series, by the way, does that excellent. I mean, if you're
Right,
not familiar with
right.
that story, check out the animated series version of that. But I was always really disappointed that Billy Dee Williams didn't get his chance to play Two-Face.
I was too. And like I said, the kind of the person I have probably the most axe to grind in this film is just Tommy Lee Jones is very much trying to be the Joker, and it's very, very off-putting at times. But like I said, it doesn't negatively impact my enjoyment of the film anymore. I've just
Ronnie's in the house, and he mentions that he says same here. Two-Face seemed like a '66 Batman punchline in Forever. And I agree.
That's true.
I agree, Ronnie.
That's a true comment.
I totally agree with you.
Now, again, just real quick, I want to thank everyone who's commenting the Rogues Gallery this evening. Again, we are giving away tonight. We're giving away 2 cards actually for tonight. One of them that we're giving away is this Riddler. It's kind of funny because it's Happy St. Patrick's Day. That's why the background is green, and we got a Riddler card here. This is a hologram card that we're giving away. It looks a lot cooler in person than it looks here on camera. It's actually really pretty cool. That's one of the cards we're giving away tonight for commenting. And then the other one here is this really cool card of Batman here. This, of course, is the Panther suit for people that are into cosplay. And I wanted to show off a couple of fun collectibles. I gave you my last pitch for why I think Batman Forever is kind of underrated and should be given a second shot. But here's kind of some fun collectibles that you can sometimes find out and about that are actually really neat. This is Batman Forever. This is they call this it's weird because when I got this, I thought it was a movie storybook, but it's actually the official movie book. There's a lot of interesting information actually in this book about Batman Forever. If you're a fan of Batman Forever, you ever see this, sometimes you can pick this up like really cheap at a convention. It's got a lot of really cool photos, a lot of interesting information about the film itself. This is a really cool book, and sometimes you can get it actually pretty cheap at a convention if you're a fan of Batman Forever. And along those lines, too, this is kind of neat as well. You never really see people talk much about this, but for the comic book fans out here, this is the Batman Forever movie adaptation. This has got a beautiful cover on it, just an absolutely beautiful cover. This is worth owning just for the cover art alone. But this is another really fun comic that sometimes you can find kind of out and about. Sometimes you can pick it up kind of on the cheap. Just kind of keep an eye out for it, especially if you're a Batman Forever fan. I wanted to kind of highlight those. All right, so here's my biggest gripe with Batman Forever. This is the thing that drives me the most nuts about Batman Forever. And I feel like this is the reason this film is kind of underrated. Like it is, okay? Too many people seem to think that Batman Forever and Batman and Robin are the same friggin' movie. It drives me absolutely berserk when I hear people talking about how bad Batman Forever is, and they start talking about Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy. Like, that's not even the same freaking movie. You're talking about a completely different film. They are very different films. And it drives me absolutely crazy when people do that. I mean, absolutely just drives me up the wall. And I see it all the time. I see it on YouTube. I see people talking at conventions. I'll bring up Batman Forever because I love the film. And then people start throwing around weird facts. It's like, that's not Batman Forever. That's Batman and Robin. So I feel like that's part of the reason this movie is underrated. And I'm sure you've heard that before, Eric, besides just for me, where people are talking and you go, you guys have got that confused. That's not exactly the same movie.
Well, we've talked about this before. You know what happens to me is a lot of times if I just casually see an image of from Batman Forever of Batman and Robin, I think of Batman and Robin. You know what I mean? Like I always get that confused. You know what I mean? So I'll be sitting there like it's like an article that's for Batman Forever. And because I see the picture and I'm like, oh, that's Batman and Robin. I don't care about that crap. You know what I mean? And then later on, I'll realize, oh, wait a second. That's not a Batman and Robin article. That's a Batman Forever article. You know what I mean? So that's the thing that happens to me is sometimes just when I see the visual very quickly, I get confused. And I think I'm looking at Batman and Robin when in fact, I'm actually looking at Batman Forever. You know what I mean? And I guess, I don't know. I'm thinking in my head, George Clooney and Val Kilmer are both pretty good looking guys. You know what I mean? So maybe there's something there too. You know what I mean? With just the look of the two of them, maybe, I don't know, because obviously Michael Keaton looks very different than those guys. You know what I mean? Well, and by the way, that's my biggest negative gripe of the Michael Keaton Batman is I always thought he was not a convincing Bruce Wayne, whereas Val Kilmer is a very convincing Bruce Wayne.
Well, and I was going to say, you can. There's one of the big stark differences, in all honesty, between Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, for example, that I think of is the fact that um, Val Kilmer is very much trying to do what Michael Keaton was doing and have there be a continuity to Batman, but then also kind of bring something to it. Versus George Clooney, he's just George Clooney in a suit, like in the suit. I don't mean like the tux suit. I mean like the bat suit. Like when you first see him, yeah, he just says, "Hi, Freeze, I'm Batman," and then they start having their crazy skate fight, like it's the Ice Capades.
Oh my God.
So Batman and Robin is I can't even rewatch that movie. And you guys have heard some of the horrible movies I talk about I love on this show. I have a hard time rewatching Batman and Robin.
Well, speaking of ice, that's what Ronnie just said. He says, "Oh, they didn't kick some ice in Forever."
No, they did not. They did not kick some ice in Forever. And how dare you say that? So that's kind of the thing that drives me the most berserk about this movie. And I feel like Batman Forever literally takes some actually like some a little bit of punishment just because people don't understand that they're too, like, for example, I'll talk with someone and they'll be like, "I didn't like Batman Forever, but I like that one with Val Kilmer in it." Like I've heard that so many times, it drives me absolutely crazy.
I love that. That's great.
And then they'll start talking about what it's like, no, you don't even. Oh, it's so funny how the people get it confused. But I feel like that's part of the reason this movie is underrated, and is because of the fact that
Batman on Ice.
Batman on Ice. Batman on Ice would have been more fun, to be honest with you, than what they did in Batman and Robin. That's hard to watch. That movie's hard to watch. Oh God, and Arnold's performance is Freeze is just so bad.
Yeah, it is so
bad. Sing! Oh my gosh, it's so bad. Gosh, it's so awful. It's even worse than Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face.
Batman and Robin may actually be overrated. As much as people hate it, it may actually be overrated.
Well, that's definitely a different perspective. I wouldn't have thought to go that way. So maybe if we ever do our overrated, DC movies, I can bring up Batman and Robin. It's overrated. It's the worst.
That would be an
movie.
Interesting thing to do at some point, is what we think are like the most overrated. Like I said, I touched on the fact that a lot of people actually feel like The Dark Knight is overrated, which I don't get. I think it's like a masterpiece. You know what I mean? But
those people are insane.
But it's there. There's a whole movement of people that are like, yeah, Dark Knight is overrated. You know what I mean? Right. So that would be an interesting discussion, though, in a later episode for us to talk about what we think are the most rated or overhyped, DC movies. That'd be pretty interesting, controversial, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think that would actually be something fun and interesting to discuss.